Good morning, students. Hope you people are doing well. Today we'll take up chapter 8, How do organisms reproduce? And the topic that we will cover today is sexual reproduction in flowers. Now, about the learning objectives for this session. That means after completion of the session, you will be able to understand all these topics in a better way. The topics are sexual reproduction, its importance, structure of flower, double fertilization and post-fertilization events. Now about sexual reproduction. It is the mode of reproduction that involves two parents or two individuals, one male and one female. The male and female body forms gametes, and the male and female gamete fuse to form a zygote. Zygote multiplies to form a new organism. As there is fusion of gametes, so there is genetic variability. That means the genetic differences among the individuals of a same species. Even the young ones or even the siblings which belong to the same parents are not of same type, and this is due to genetic variability only. Now about the importance of reproduction. It maintains the variations and it involves genetic recombination which increases adaptability and leads to evolution. Let's discuss these 2 points further. As I have already told you people that in sexual reproduction, male and female gamete fuses to form zygote. That means the male genetic makeup and the female genetic makeup fuses together, the genetic materials fuses together, so it leads to variations. That means individual differences among the members of same species, and due to the genetic recombination it increases the adaptability. Suppose there is same kind of organism with same set of genetic material or same type of genetic material, and some adverse condition arises suddenly in the environment, and the genes which those organisms are having are not able to cope up with the changed environmental condition, so all the members will disappear as they are not able to cope up with the changes. But if there is genetic variability, some of the organisms will disappear while some will make their existence possible. So it means that genetic variations or recombinations, basically it increases adaptability also, and when we become adaptable, there will be evolution of the species. The species will develop in a better way. So evolution is possible due to this genetic variability. Now about the types of cell division. In a living organism, the cells keep on multiplying, and there is 2 types of cell division in eukaryotic organisms, mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis takes place in the somatic cells. Somatic cells means which are not transferred from one body to another. Suppose the skin cells or the cells of the organs which we are having are the somatic cells. It is not transferred to our next generation. So it also maintains the chromosome number constant and produces 2 diploid daughter cells. It required for asexual reproduction, development and growth of the body, cell replacement and regeneration. So these are some uses or importance of the mitotic or mitosis division. And in mitotic division, the parental cell, if having 24 chromosomes, then the daughter cells which are formed, each cell will have 24 chromosomes similar to the parental cell. And in meiosis, it takes place in sex cells, that means in reproductive organs, when the reproductive organs form the gametes. At that time, meiosis takes place and it reduces the chromosome number half. How it is important. Suppose the mother cell or the parental cell is having 24 chromosomes and the mother is forming gamete which is again having 24 chromosome, and the father is forming gamete which is having 24 chromosomes again. And if male and female gamete fuses, the individual will be with 48 chromosomes, 24 plus 24, and then a different species will get started. There will be no constancy, there will be no existence of a species, because in each step we are having a new species. So why it is important to reduce the chromosome number to half before fertilization or before fusion of the gametes, so we can retain the same chromosome number of the species. Suppose the mother is forming the gamete, at that time she will show meiotic division and the gamete cells are formed by meiosis. Similarly in the father, so suppose both are having 24 chromosomes in a parental cell, then they will form the gamete with half chromosome number. That means male gamete with 12 chromosomes and female gamete also with 12 chromosomes. And when they fuse together, again the new cell, which is termed as zygote, it will be having the 24 chromosomes similar to the parent body itself. So we have retained the number of the chromosome which is for that species, and this is termed as attaining the constant chromosome number, which is essential. Now in it, 4 daughter cells which are haploid in nature are produced. Haploid means single set of chromosome is there. Suppose I am saying that there is 11 chromosomes, so this is the haploid condition. And if I am saying that there are 11 pairs of chromosome, the condition is diploid. That means 2 set of chromosomes are there. And it is required for sexual reproduction, that is gamete formation. Now the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Sexual reproduction in plants happen through the flowers. Flower is the basic body which is involved in the sexual reproduction, and it has essential and non-essential, or I should say that they are having the accessory whorls and the reproductive whorl. The accessory whorl is the part which is not directly involved in reproduction but facilitates reproduction, while the reproductive part is the main part of the flower which is directly involved in sexual reproduction. So androecium and gynoecium. Androecium is the male reproductive part and gynoecium is the female reproductive part, and both are directly involved in sexual reproduction, so they are considered as the essential or reproductive part of a flower. Now this is the structure of a flower. As you are able to see, there is a stalk-like structure on which the whole flower locates, and this stalk-like structure is termed as pedicel. It is swollen at the tip, and that swollen part is termed as thalamus or receptacle, over which the floral appendages or floral parts locates. The green leaf-like structures are termed as sepals, and collectively this whorl is termed as calyx. It is green in color, so it helps in photosynthesis, and it also protects the petals and inner structures in bud condition. Now the large showy part is the petal, which attracts the pollinators, the insects and the bees and the birds, which helps in dispersal of the pollen grains, or which helps in pollination. So the petals are large and showy generally, and they attract the pollinators for pollination, and the collective term for petal or this whorl is termed as corolla. Now the inner part, there is stamens. Collectively the stamens are termed as androecium, it is having a filament which attaches it to the main part of the flower, and the lobe like structure which are termed as anther lobes, in which the pollen grain formation takes place. Now the innermost part is the gynoecium. The single unit is termed as pistil, and it has three parts. Upper part is stigma, which receives the pollen grain, then a tube-like structure termed as style, and then the swollen part termed as ovary, which has round ball-like structures termed as ovules. So this is a very important diagram for board exam. You need to practice it very properly, and this is the LS or the longitudinal section of a flower. I would like to mention here that the flowers are of two types, unisexual and bisexual. If there is only male reproductive part or female reproductive part in a flower, it will be termed as unisexual. And if there is androecium and gynoecium, both are present in a single flower, then the flower is bisexual in nature. Here the flower which is shown is having the pistil, or we can say the female reproductive part, as well as the stamen, which is the male reproductive part. So this flower is bisexual in nature. Now about the different parts of flower in detail. The accessory part of flowers are the sepals and petals. Bulbs are, as they do not directly take part in reproduction, the sepals protect the inner delicate whorl during bud condition and also perform photosynthesis as they are green in color. Now about the reproductive parts of flowers. Androecium and gynoecium are called as the essential reproductive whorls of a flower. Androecium produces pollen grains containing male gametes. Each pollen grain has two male gametes. You need to remember it. And gynoecium produces ovules which are having female gametes. Now the bisexual flowers contain both the whorls. Having unisexual flower contain either of them. Each individual members of androecium is called a stamen and consists of anther and filament. Anther produces the haploid pollen grains, and each individual member of gynoecium is called as pistil and consists of stigma, style and ovary. Now about pollination. It is the process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower, and it is necessary for fertilization. Fertilization takes place after pollination, and pollination is of two types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, the pollen grains transfer from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. And in cross-pollination, pollen are transferred from anther to the stigma of another flower. Many pollinating agents play their role in cross-pollination, example water, wind, insect, bird, bat, etc. Now this is the image which is showing the self-pollination and cross-pollination. Pollination within a flower is termed as self-pollination, and between two flowers it is termed as cross-pollination. Now about the germination of pollen on stigma. Pollen on stigma, when the pollen grain reaches there, the germ cells or the pollen tube get formed by the germination of the pollen grain, and the male gametes get into the pollen tube, and the pollen tube keep on increasing in size and digesting the cells in the pathway and make a way towards the ovule, and then it will enter the ovule through a pore termed as micropyle, and finally it enters the ovule and liberates the two male gametes inside the ovule, and the one male gamete fuses with the female gamete forming the zygote, while the another male gamete fuses with the two polar nuclei forming the primary endosperm nucleus, which is also termed as PEN. And finally, because three nuclei are fusing here, it is termed as triple fusion. So in brief, I will say that in germination of pollen stigma, it leads to the formation of the pollen tube, which moves towards the ovule. Now about the fertilization. In angiospermic plant, that means the flower producing plants, there is a special type of fertilization termed as the double fertilization, in which two male gametes fuses with one female gamete and the two polar nuclei at the same time inside the same ovule. So it is double fertilization, and the male and female gamete fusion is termed as fertilization or syngamy, and the flowering plants after pollination, the pollens germinate on the stigma surface of the pistil and generate two male gametes. Ovule has egg cell and two polar nuclei. One male nucleus fuses with two polar nuclei and forms triploid endosperm. Another male nucleus fuses with the egg cell and forms the zygote that give rise to the embryo and the future plant. After fertilization, the post-fertilization events takes place, in which the petal sepals, they wither off, that means they fall off. Only the fertilized ovary remain intact to the thalamus, and the fertilized ovary is the fruit itself, and the fertilized ovules are the seeds which enclose the baby plant inside it. So these are the post-fertilization events. I would like to discuss a slide which we have already discussed earlier again. As it is mentioned that pollination is of two types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. Here it is mentioned that in self-pollination, transfer of pollen grains takes from anther to the stigma of the same flower. That is right, that the transfer takes place within a flower. But when a plant is having two flowers, at that time, the exchange of pollen grain from one flower to another, it is a part of cross-pollination, that is physically. But genetically, on the level of the genes, because it is belonging to the same plant and both the flowers are having the same genes. So genetically it is considered as self-pollination, but physically or overall we can see that from one flower the pollen grains are transferred to the another flower. So it is cross-pollination. So to make it more clear, I would like you to take it as self-pollination is only when there is the transfer of pollen to the stigma of the same flower. But if it is taking place from one flower to another flower, even of the same plant, at that time we will keep it into cross-pollination only, as physically we are seeing the transfer of the pollen grain, and genetically if we go to the minute level, it is similar to the self-pollination. But here in class 10, we will not get that deep into the topic. We will mention it as cross-pollination. Now the cross-pollination is also when the flowers of two different plants are exchanging the pollen grain. So self-pollination is when the same pollen grain is transferred to the stigma of the same flower, while cross-pollination is when the pollen grain transfers from one flower to another flower of the same plant or between two plants of same species and the two flowers are located in two different plants. So that is also cross-pollination. I think I have made this point clear to you people, and there are many pollinating agents like water, wind, insect, birds, bats, etc. So now about the seed. As I have already told you that the seed encloses the embryo. Seed is the fertilized ovule, and the embryo has a plumule, that is the part which will form the shoot system, and the radicle which will form the root system, and this embryonal axis or the embryo is attached to two leaf-like structure, and those leaf-like structures are termed as cotyledons, which are present inside the seed. These cotyledons have the stored food material which will be consumed by the embryo during its development, and then finally the embryo will come out through the seed to form a young plant, and the process of coming out from the seed is termed as germination of the seed. Hope you people have got the topics clearly, and now about some important questions for practice. These are the frequently asked questions for board exam. First is draw a label diagram of a bisexual flower and mention the role of each part. Second question is what is pollination? Mention its types. Third question is what do you mean by double fertilization? It is the fertilization in which two fusions takes place together. The first fertilization is syngamy, in which one male gamete fuses with one female gamete to form a zygote, while the second fertilization is termed as triple fusion, in which two polar nuclei fuses with the male gamete to form primary endosperm nucleus, which later develop into the endosperm nucleus, and because of fusion of three nuclei, it is termed as triple fusion. So two fertilizations are taking place inside a single ovule, so it is termed as double fertilization. Now the next question is draw a label diagram to show germination of pollen grain on stigma, and the last question is mention the post-fertilization events in a flower. So all these are important questions. You need to practice it, do it in your copy and maintain the record also. Thank you for the patient listening. Take care.